work. First, though, an historic day in Illinois. Real-life court drama could soon be coming to Chicago television. The Illinois Supreme Court is now allowing cameras in the courtroom. Phil Rogers has that story.
Bruno Richard Hauptmann is found guilty by a country jury of 8 men and 4 women.
Back in 1935, the Lindbergh kidnapping trial became such a media circus that cameras were banned in courtrooms across America. Courtroom sketches became the order of the day for some 4 decades. But slowly, times have changed.
Illinois was one of 14 states in the country that did not allow cameras. That means most states do.
Supreme Court Justice Mary Jane Tice says cameras are not the future, they're the present, that the public should see how the system works.
We want to make sure that Illinois courts are open and transparent and accountable. But we do want to balance that, of course, with the right to fair trial.
Each circuit in the state will have the option of opting in or opting out.
I have no doubt that it can be a big plus.
Chief Judge Tim Evans here in Cook County says he will apply immediately.
I believe the public has an opportunity under this pilot program to see what really takes place.
To be sure, there have been mistakes. Most observers agree Judge Lance Ito presided over a judicial train wreck in the O.J. Simpson case. But there were cameras in the courtroom with serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, and that went smoothly.
If you don't have anything to hide, why can't people watch?
Our accounts of Sam Adams Jr.'s bombastic courtroom procedures hardly did him justice. He believes the more eyes watching, the healthier the system.
People are acquitted and convicted the same way, whether or not the cameras are there. I think what it is, it's people afraid of change.
Chicagoland's next trial of the century will be the murder proceedings against Drew Peterson in Will County. His attorney said today he hopes the public gets to watch.
We want them to see that this isn't a murder so that when Drew Peterson is acquitted, they understand.
Joining me now to talk more about this is attorney Thomas Glasgow. You know, as a journalist who covers court cases, we're glad to see it, only because the more information, the more access to information, in our view, is better. But you're an attorney who's been a prosecutor, you're a defense attorney, and you are in courtrooms all the time. What's your take on this?
I think what people are going to see is that courtroom drama really doesn't unfold the same way as when you see it on television in these crime dramas. And in Illinois, we haven't had cameras, so people tend to think that it unwinds like a CSI or it happens like Law and Order and everything's wrapped up in about an hour. It doesn't really happen that way, and everybody's not as smooth, and everybody doesn't have these great lines, and you don't always have the judge that, you know, sits there and says, "I'll allow you a little leeway, counsel." It happens in a very, very methodical fashion, and prosecutors are methodical, and defense attorneys sometimes can be very flamboyant, sometimes they can't, sometimes they aren't what you expect them to be.
But is that a bad thing for the public to see? I mean, maybe it's good for the public to have a more realistic view of how a courtroom really operates.
Well, and it is, and we've all become accustomed to courtrooms on TV. We see this in, you know, various trials throughout the country that are broadcast and rebroadcast over and over and over again.
Watched the Casey Anthony trial recently?
Exactly. But people do tend to have a different view of how to act in front of a camera. And part of what the safeguards that have been put into place is that the trial judge does have the discretion to stop all this if he feels that the rights of the defendant are being trampled at some point. We've seen what kind of circus has happened with regard to Drew Peterson, and you know, with regard to the story before, you hark back to the Lindbergh baby and how out of control things got. Could it trample the rights of the victims in this case? Perhaps, but there's safeguards that have been put into place for this to prevent that. Forcible felonies can't be filmed. You know, motions to quash arrests and suppress evidence where evidence that shouldn't come in, doesn't come in, are not allowed to be broadcast. Those are good things for this particular program.
If you had your druthers, would you say yay or nay?
I think it's perfectly fine as long as the trial judge has the discretion to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand.
So what have the primary arguments been? I mean, it's been a long time. Many other jurisdictions have them. What have been the primary arguments against them?
When you don't sequester a jury, let's say you have a jury trial and you don't sequester them, the media coverage sometimes tends to taint what the jury thinks and feels. Hey, my case is on TV. Everybody's talking about it. And they're not going to a hotel every night. You get a very long trial like the R. Kelly trial, or you get something like the O.J. Simpson trial that lasts and lasts and lasts, and people get to go home. They see it themselves. They see what happened on TV. That's not what happened. They look at the coverage, etc. But the counter-argument is they see that anyway. They see that anyway through the Blagojevich trial. They see it, you know, in every case that we've had. We just have, you know, a chalkboard drawing as opposed to the actual what occurs in court and the way they see the witnesses.
Why do you think it's taken this long? I mean, we're one of only 14 at this point. That's a long time to be behind the curve, really.
Because people are reluctant to change. And when you're comfortable with something and you're comfortable with the way it is, you don't really want to change. I think this is going to bring a transparency to the courtroom, and people can see it then. People can see that, you know, what happens in the paper or what happens on a transcript doesn't really happen the way that it is said. You can say something to me, and you can say one thing, but your tone and intonation mean something completely different. And as judges say, the record reads cold. When you bring a camera in, you get to see and hear how it actually occurred.
Yeah, that's a good point from a journalist point of view. It's hard to make that translation. It's really hard to get that across. Do you see all jurisdictions jumping in, or do you see some being more reluctant?
You're going to have more conservative jurisdictions that don't want to have it. In fact, all the jurisdictions here in Illinois don't have to. They have to apply through the chief judge. And, you know, we were talking about the Drew Peterson case. The chief judge of that county hasn't even made an application yet for the pilot program, so we don't know whether or not cameras are going to be allowed there.
That's true. All right. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
You too. Senator Mark Kirk's doctor has updated the media on his condition and reveals that Kirk is mentally